Hey everybody, welcome to the For Evansville podcast. My name is Jonathan Betcher and I'm here with Ross Chapman. And this is the last episode of season 1. We've come to the end of an entire season of the For Evansville podcast. And I got to tell you, that feels really good.
Yeah, you know what? Big congratulations to you because you're the person really making this happen. And Adrian. And Adrian's on maternity leave, so she's not with us.
I'm realizing while she's gone, how much it's Adrian who makes this happen.
There you go. Yeah, Adrian brings the magic.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, but really, it's been an awesome season. Really fun. Kind of our first full year of doing a podcast, and we were really excited about launching it. It was just a blast. So, it's the last episode of season 1.
Yeah, I have to tell you, there's another accomplishment that I've been thinking about recently that I'm really proud of. And it's that, and people who are just listening on the podcast won't be able to appreciate this, but there's a plant that's always on our table whenever we're recording that you can see if you watch on YouTube. And I'm shocked and proud of the fact that that plant is still alive.
It's grown, actually.
Despite the fact that Adrian hasn't been here for a good little while now.
Yeah, that's true. We haven't killed it.
This plant is still thriving. So,
it is some sort of easy plant to maintain.
Yes, but we did kill at least one before Adrian was here.
I thought you were going to say something like you've been strategically placing it at different places on the table for each episode, and if we had been following along, we could have picked that up.
No, but that's a good idea for season 2. Maybe we'll incorporate some kind of hidden message.
There you go. You got to stay on your toes then as a listener.
Yeah.
Or watcher.
Yeah. Part of me wants to like gradually replace the plant with like a larger plant so that at the end we've got like a tree in the background. Be great? And just not say anything about it. But
well, hey, enough about plants. Here's what's going on today on the podcast. We want to do a little bit of a recap of our first season. We also want to tell you guys a little bit more about For Evansville. So you may be listening in and learning about the city and what it means to not just be in Evansville, but to be for Evansville. But we want to tell you a little bit more about the work that we're doing outside of the podcast.
Right.
And then we want to also tell you what's coming up for season 2 and what to expect. So that's where we're going on today's episode.
Season 1 was a lot of fun. I was thinking about this morning. We really covered a pretty broad range of topics and like the people that we had on the podcast. I've just really enjoyed being able to have all of those conversations. Some of them more lighthearted and fun, some of them more serious, but all of them really great for me, at least. So if we accomplish nothing else with this podcast, I'm glad we did it because I got to have a lot of really great conversations, and that was a lot of fun. And really, that was kind of what we were thinking when we came up with this idea for the podcast. It was like, For Evansville really values listening first as a core value of ours. It's a key part of who we are as an organization. And so the podcast was an excuse to do more of that, but also a way to invite a broader audience into that listening. And maybe you could just talk a little bit about why that's important and why that is a core value at For Evansville.
Well, it's important because if we're going to be working together to create the kind of city where everyone can flourish, to have a kind of life that is enriching, and we need to understand our city. We really need to know what is happening and what are the barriers that we are trying to overcome. Why is it hard to overcome them? And really get a good understanding of what makes Evansville.
Right.
It was cool because I think we had almost 20 guests in this first season.
Well, actually more than that, because at the beginning, we often had more than one guest at a time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then we talked to a whole bunch of people we thought were just doing a great job of being for Evansville and not just being in Evansville. So yeah, we got to hear from a lot of people. And it kind of imitated it wasn't just about our value. It was about we think this is the first step.
Right.
If we're going to make change in our community, the first thing we need to do is listen. We don't want to come in with answers. We don't want to assume that we know everything. We want to be open. We want to be willing to be taught.
Yeah, and I hope that value has come across in this podcast and kind of in our posture as we talk to different guests and stuff. And I hope that maybe some of that has kind of rubbed off on listeners as well. And I would love to envision that if this podcast accomplishes anything, it's that listeners sort of adopt that listen first mentality and have the ability to, just look for opportunities to dig a little bit deeper into what's going on in the city around them specifically, whether that's talking to the neighbors in your neighborhood or in the neighborhood adjacent to you, or if there's an issue that you care about, just taking that first step of like, I don't know how I can get involved, but I know this person's kind of involved. So I'm going to buy them coffee and we're just going to talk about it. Because I think often that just leads to so many other places. It's a great first step if you're trying to figure out how can I be not just in Evansville, but for Evansville. A great first step is just listen. Find something that you're passionate about, dig a little bit deeper into it. And I think other opportunities will come up during that time. So
yeah, and I think the other reality is we live in a current cultural moment where it's, let me tell you what I think before I listen to you.
Right.
Whether that happens on social media or if it's what we listen to on the news or, whatever conversation we might be in, this is an opportunity to develop the skill and the practice and making it a priority to listen. I think that's a lot of what our society needs right now.
Yeah.
We need to listen to each other better. We need to take the time to give people the opportunity to share their thoughts and consider whether or not we might learn something from them.
Yeah, that's good. So For Evansville is more than a podcast. That's not the only thing that we do.
Yes.
Not really even the majority of what we do.
Yeah. For Evansville the idea started in 2015. There was a local business owner. His name is Tom, we'll call him. And so he's calls me up. I'm living in Charlotte. And he says, hey, I think we need someone in Evansville who can be freed up to just pursue the idea of how people work together better and really help Evansville be the city that I know it can be. And so he just wanted to free somebody's time up for that. So there was no job description, no organization. The short story is, 5 months later, my family, we moved back to Evansville and started this idea of like, how do we get people to really work together for the good of the city? So I spent a year listening, just trying to meet with as many leaders as possible. And that was important because I didn't have any answers and I didn't have a plan really.
Right.
And so that plan was to listen and to really understand Evansville. We had a unique and special emphasis on helping church leaders connect with one another and build trust. And then we started kind of talking about like, well, what did we just learn in all of this listening? And that's about the time you came into the story, a little over a year later. And you being kind of focused on storytelling really helped, I think, a lot of our leaders really get a picture of what's going on in Evansville and how we might participate in some of that. So that's how it kind of started. It was just kind of two guys pursuing this question of how do we all work together for the good, the common good, the flourishing of Evansville, and what is our role in bringing people together to kind of solve some of our city's most pressing needs.
Right. And today we've kind of identified 4 like key things that we're able to do to sort of help that collaboration happen, because it's not like that collaboration wasn't happening at all in Evansville. I think people were eager to work together and there was kind of this growing excitement about the city. And so the ways that we've been able to kind of help support that movement and kind of fan those flames is one, helping to build trust among leaders. That's a huge thing because I don't know who said this. Maybe you can attribute this quote, but we say it all the time, but we didn't come up with it. But collaboration moves at the speed of trust. So people aren't going to work together if they don't know each other and trust each other. So we try to help facilitate those relationships and that trust building We also say that we sort of cultivate the right conditions for collaboration to happen.
Right.
Because even if you trust somebody and you want to work together,
Still very
oftentimes
hard.
there are a lot of
Mhm.
barriers. And oftentimes those barriers are really practical things, logistical things like, well, we've got a staff and we're focused on this, and you've got a staff that's focused on this, and we don't have time to figure out like how we can work together and collaborate. So
Yeah, that could be removing barriers, or it could be creating tools
right.
that makes collaboration, just easier to happen
Mhm.
and more effective. And so we're excited about just experimenting with what works in that space. The other thing we do, you guys know, is we tell a story about the city we're living in and the kind of city we hope to live in. And actually, Jonathan is our director of storytelling, so he does a lot of this stuff. So, Jonathan, why don't you tell us some of your thought process and the things that we do in terms of storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, I think storytelling is it's almost like how we package our listening and then deliver it. The story that we believe about our city, the story that we believe about ourselves in relation to our city has everything to do with whether we're involved in that story and playing a positive role in it or not. And oftentimes, if we don't have a very compelling story to participate in, then we're not going to be excited about being involved. And so I think a lot of our storytelling efforts are twofold. It's really about how do we paint a realistic picture of the needs and dreams of our city to be able to look at what's broken in our city in a really honest way and to say this really is a problem, and to understand that and to feel it and relate to it. We use the phrase inspire empathy a lot, and that's really about like I want to identify with what's broken in my city and feel some kind of personal connection to it, because the reality is that there's just not an issue anywhere in our city that doesn't affect me in some way, directly or indirectly. And so being able to convey that in storytelling, but also being able to paint this picture of the possibility of what our city could be and what it could mean to be a good neighbor and a good citizen that's playing a positive role in that story. Every story has tension. Every good story has conflict and has obstacles that need to be overcome. So we want to paint an honest, realistic picture of those, but not in a way that is negative or derogatory towards Evansville, but in a way that kind of inspires you to rise to the occasion and say,
right.
I want to play a role in that story and move our city towards flourishing and move our city towards being a place where everyone can overcome those barriers and play that positive role in the story.
And you've done such a good job of that. If you all don't know, this is a 2-time Emmy winner right here. Regional Emmy winner. So if you haven't seen our short films, Left Turn and Left Turn 2, they both won Emmys. We got a couple other ones as well. You can check those out on forevansville.org.
And we're working on one right now.
We're working on a new project
to release in 2022.
Yes.
So won't spill the beans too much on that one, but
stay
we're
tuned.
excited to be. It's been a while since we've done a short film, and so we're excited to be back in that space. So.
I was just thinking as you were talking, you said inspire empathy. The other thing we're doing is imagine Evansville. And I like that there's an I word and an E word in both of those. Inspire empathy and imagine Evansville. So that's a really cool thing. And the last thing that we do is just kind of take the opportunities as they come to just rally key leaders around certain opportunities, I guess, where we can kind of activate people toward the right issues at the right time. And so we've got some big goals for 2022 that we would love to tell you about that are related to this kind of last thing that we do. So one of our big priorities is Charity Tracker. Charity Tracker is like this online shared database. So as all these nonprofits work together to serve individuals and families, this allows them to communicate, which I think is the first step in collaboration. It's communication,
right?
To communicate better. So instead of there being sort of 17 databases from all these 17 different organizations, although there are many more. It would just be one database that they're all sharing. The information is confidential, and you only get to see it when you need to see it.
Right.
And it's all secure and safe. And this is it's actually a product that's in 1,800 communities around the country. It was created in response to Katrina in 2005, and we're really excited. We have almost 50 agencies on there right now, and we're trying to get them all using it. But it's been so encouraging to see nonprofits, churches, businesses kind of leveraging this systemic level tool, I would say.
Well, and that's huge because I think all of those different organizations play kind of a specialized role in helping to empower somebody to better their own circumstances and to be able to move forward, and there isn't any one organization that's able to completely do that for somebody.
We all have to work together on that.
Yes. And so being able to have almost like a shared scorecard, of like, here's where we're at, and to be able to connect all of those organizations in a way that they can really rally around that individual and empower them. It just kind of says something about our city.
It really does.
All of those organizations say, we have a role to play in helping this person, but a lot of other organizations do too. And so we're gonna work together so that we can put that person first and really like help them succeed.
Yeah, I'm already proud of how our communities kind of come around this idea of sharing information in this way. And I think shared scorecard is a good way to say it. But we've got communities from around the state that call us now. And we've just started this, just as the pandemic started. So we haven't been doing it long, and we were getting calls from other places around the state saying, hey, how are you using Charity Tracker? And can you help us kind of get started in our community or help us learn what you're doing? So that's been really encouraging, but our big goal is to double the number of agencies on there by the end of next year. And we're going to be putting a lot of effort and investment into that. The second thing that we're doing is we're really trying to come around as many schools as we can in our region and help just raise up the ecosystem of partners around them. So that's churches, businesses, nonprofits. It could be, the small business in the neighborhood of the school. It could be a local church. That we just want to wrap around the schools in our communities and say, what's your vision? And then how can we then go and support it with whatever the resources are that we have?
Right.
And so we're really going to get focused on this. We're very excited. We've been doing some work with other community leaders over the last 3 months to just really understand kind of the landscape, especially in Vandenberg County, of what partnership looks like. I'm very encouraged and excited about what I've heard from the EVSC and their partnerships that they already have, and their enthusiasm for improving, and saying, yes, we want more partners. We would like for this to be even better than it is now.
Yeah, this like fourth category of what we do, we often use the phrase like finding what wants to happen, and like supporting it and championing it. And I feel like this kind of like needs to happen in Evansville, because there's a lot of energy and momentum around it, and that's why I would say it's something that wants to happen. But it's also true that schools are like the place where almost every systemic issue that our city is facing comes to bear on a school and on the kids in schools. And so schools were never intended to be the sole force facing all of those challenges, and honestly they just can't. They do a really good job, and teachers and school administrators like far exceed, they go above and beyond the call of duty, for what their
job is education, but they do so much more.
Yes, it feels like it's time for the community to step up and rally around our schools and to be able to say, we're going to help with addressing all of these other challenges so that you can just do an incredible job of teaching our kids.
Yeah, I mean, actually, we were on a call yesterday with some people talking about this, and one of the leaders on there, one of our former podcast guests, actually, Jeremy Evans was saying, hey, I was talking to a leader over at the school corporation, and she kind of pointed out how, it's nice to hear thank yous from other community partners when like teachers hear that.
Mm-hmm.
But what is a really big game changer is when teachers hear thank yous from parents.
Mm.
And it was just kind of like oh yeah moment. Like, I've got kids in school, and I haven't thought to just send a note to the teachers saying, hey, thank you for investing in my kids and teaching them and caring for them. And so I'm just going to throw out a challenge. If you're a parent or a grandparent, and you've got kids in school somewhere, which I assume you would, then consider what would it look like for you to write a note to their teachers and just say thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Our third big goal for 2022 is to help build kind of the infrastructure of networks, specifically for church leaders.
Mm-hmm.
We feel like church leaders, when they have trust with one another, when they know that they can talk to another person in the community that walks in their shoes, we think everybody kind of wins. And so we want to create networks where those church leaders have opportunities where they can build those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
They can establish trust with other leaders around them. Maybe it's the same side of the city. Maybe it's, they have a similar role at their church, or they have a similar passion about a specific cause or community. And we want to use all of those opportunities to just kind of make the Church of Evansville smaller,
Mm-hmm.
and help those church leaders connect.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about, like you said, when church leaders are well connected in that way, everybody wins. Let's unpack that a little bit, because I'm sure there are a number of listeners that we have that church maybe isn't part of their life. And so they might feel like, what does a church leader have to do with like me or with our city in general? But that's a big part of kind of what For Evansville is about as well. And something that that's a key focus that I think is kind of unique to For Evansville a little bit. So
it is unique. And, we've been kind of studying alongside the Harvard Flourishing program.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 4 pathways to human flourishing, according to Harvard. And one of them
4 is not a lot.
4 is not a lot. There's not 100. There's not so many that, there's
Right.
all these avenues. It's work, family, school, and religious communities.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the 4 pathways that lead to human flourishing, as studied through this whole program they have at Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting. And so religious communities are integral to our city. Spiritual life is important to human flourishing. And so we think focusing on church leaders is going to benefit everyone, because it is one of those pathways. But on a practical level, what I think about is, the churches collectively of our region represent, I would think, one of the most, if not the most, social capital, financial capital, relational capital that there is.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would it look like for it to be more connected and more strategically aligned on the needs and dreams of our city?
Right.
And that can't happen if church leaders aren't building trust with one another and having opportunities to talk and learn together and understand, actually we have way more in common than we are different.
Right.
And I think that's going to trickle down to all the people who are part of those religious communities, who start to see, in terms of the Christian faith, we are all believing in Jesus, and his mission.
Mm-hmm.
And we have so much more alignment than we probably realize. And so getting that connection to happen is just going to be a release, I think, of kind of the things that want to happen.
Right. Yeah.
in
Our
community.
friend Eric Swanson talks about finding latent energy in your city, or energy that's just kind of dormant. It's not really doing anything.
It's just waiting to be sent
and,
out.
and being
Yep.
able to activate that. And so, I would say that within churches in Evansville, there's a lot of latent energy. There's a lot of people who have a lot of compassion and care for their city and want to see our city become a place where everybody is thriving and flourishing.
Yeah, it's been great to see that there are great examples of churches stepping into those needs, working together at times. We just want to see a lot more of it. The other encouraging thing is in all of the listening that we've done and the conversations we've had with city leaders about key issues, or just in the the meetings that we're in, it's a constant sort of desire for the leaders in our city to see local churches step in and help with homelessness, foster care, housing, whatever the situations are.
Right. It's kind of like our city already recognizes that potential energy that exists there.
So that's why it's a really big focus for us at For Evansville. We feel like we are kind of positioned well to do that in our city, and we feel like that's something we got to own and step up and do. So those are our 3 things for 2022: charity tracker, partnerships with schools, and building this network infrastructure for churches. And we're really, really pumped about how that fits into our strategies. And we'll be, of course, doing another podcast season, doing some stories and continuing a lot of things that we've always done in the past. But Jonathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we can expect season 2 of the podcast?
Yeah, so we're really excited about season 2. I think we've learned a lot over season 1 about how the podcast can be most beneficial to our listeners. And so we're excited to kind of tell stories that are related to a lot of things we just talked about. So, I think listeners can expect to hear a lot of different stories from different angles related to schools in our community. And we'll be hitting other topics as well, hearing from more people who are for Evansville. And I think in season 2, we want to be able to still bring on guests and do listening, but also to be able to do a little bit more of that storytelling and kind of taking what we've heard and shaping it into a story of Evansville that everybody can be excited about and find a way to get involved in.
Yeah, I'm very excited about what's coming up. And one of my favorite parts of season 1 was at the end of every podcast, we kind of got a chance to just debrief. What did we hear and what should we do about it? I think that can be a continuing thing in season 2. Today's podcast, what can you do? What did we think about it? Hope you heard, write a note to a teacher.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a teacher maybe it's a teacher you're actually teaching your kid or grandkid. Encourage them. And then I just want to also give you guys the opportunity. We're a nonprofit organization, and if you've enjoyed the podcast and you want us to continue growing it and bringing guests on, we'd love for you to kind of join in partnering with us. So you could do that by going to forevansville.org/invest and support us in any way you want. We're going to continue to do this and help people not just be in Evansville, but be for Evansville. And just want to thank you for being part of our season and trying to live in a way that is a benefit for your city.